Well, we thought since we were celebrating the 2014 paint scheme that we would go back and get some of the guys that were involved in the team to kind of have a roundtable discussion of what were some of our favorite moments and memories and conversations and things that happened throughout the year. So we'll have fun with this conversation and see where it all goes. I think that the interesting part to me for 2014, and you guys lived it on a daily basis, was just the fact that we started a team. And I think in the beginning we went through kind of really just learning about the processes of what we needed to be doing. I mean, that's how I remember it I think at Texas the front of the crank fell off, and I think that there were some other issues that we had just in situations, but I think everybody knew how fast the cars were. But I think the interesting part to me was the beginning of the year when we probably didn't really have enough cars to even race very much and cycle them through, and every week we kind of kept having more and more cars and more capability of depth and everything that we needed in the hauler, and coming into a new shop and the processes of the building and some of that culture change within the building was interesting as we went through the first part of the year. So I think that that was the interesting part to me. The second half of the year, I felt like we just raced and did what we needed to do, but that first half of the year was really building a team and learning how an organization functioned internally with how everything worked, and then how everybody was going to work and what we needed to work on, because we didn't really have a baseline. I think it just became easier as the year went, but I think that's the interesting part, that you guys built it from the beginning. Billy, you were here. I mean, there was a lot of things that were kind of in place, but not many.
It was pretty wild for me when we started that program. I met with Rodney before the season was over in 13, and we kind of got a few people in place, and we knew what we were going to do, and they were like, that corner down there in the shop where there isn't anything, that's y'all's. Go ahead and get to work. So I remember ordering the most trivial pieces that you don't think, like drain pans and jack stands and jacks. Like, we didn't have that. Yeah. So even though that the Stewart-Haas was really established to start 14 as an organization, the 14 really started from scratch. And I think without doing that and having the adversity and the problems and the trials that we went through, we wouldn't have learned to win together as a group at the back end of the season.
And you also knew what you had.
Yeah, exactly.
You knew where all your nuts and bolts were. And
yeah.
I think, a lot of people that come into a new team, they don't know where their cars and their chassis and all the things have actually been. You knew where every nut, bolt, washer, car, wheel, you knew the life of it. And I think that to me was actually a help, because of the fact that it was a lot of work in the beginning, but you knew what you had because you guys put it all together.
Yeah, we knew every single piece and part, every scratch on every chassis. It was crazy, because I came in every morning and would have a list this long of stuff, and like you said, I mean, you had all new people. Like, none of us had really worked together, so we had to learn each other and what people were good at, and what how we needed to structure it differently and take advantage of everybody's strengths. And and the struggles were stuff on the racetrack and rubbing through oil lines at Bristol and all that was bad, but we learned a lot from that, and kept us from having those struggles in the playoffs when it really mattered.
Yeah, the people side of things, that side of things, I don't think was ever an issue, because you did such a great job. You had plenty of time to get people assembled and really take time to pick the right people. And when we came in, everybody just clicked, and just boom, boom, and it happened. I remember it worked together. Everybody pulled the rope the same direction, and like you said, on the cars and chassis, we got to build everything the way we wanted it, the way we thought it was going to be the best for a competition side, and whatever it took is what we did.
That part was a big deal. Like, the way our cars were compared to the way they were the year before was massively different.
What was that culture? I mean, what was the culture change like? I mean, you lived it before. What was the biggest difference?
The amount of time put in and the detail work top to bottom.
Detail was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
The little stuff that really makes the difference. The little stuff is what made the difference. And the thing is too is I think and you can't fault them for that. But when we came in, they were still living off the 2011 championship with Tony and what they did to make that championship work in 2011. Well, when we come in 2014, things have evolved and changed. And it just needed to regroup and reset. And that's what we did when we came in, and it helped the whole organization.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was handfuls of people that had that detail work and that effort level, but none of them put and grouped together as a full team, you know. And I think you look at those of us that were here that got brought in by Rodney, you know, he picked those people that were here and put them on his team and mixed us with other people from outside that had that same effort level and intensity for wanting to win and be the best. And that kind of made that difference as a whole for one group to just be solid.
Yeah, I mean, everybody just bought in. You know, there was nobody that even questioned not buying in. Like, they were on it from the get-go. And like, every piece of equipment that we had was like the nicest in the garage. The truck, the trailer, the pit box, the toolbox, every piece and part. When we pulled it out at the Daytona 500, everybody was like, holy cow, these boys are not messing around.
I don't think people realize how much hours we put in. 3 of us were on the 39 car. We come back from Homestead. The season was longer. We took Thanksgiving off. After that, we worked 7 days a week till midnight.
How'd you convince, who was the hardest one to convince that I wasn't going to just be this crazy mother that flew off the handle all the time?
Well, I got to admit, I was one of those guys. We were sitting at my kitchen table talking. I said, now, I know Kevin is hot here from time to time, but what's it going to be like? And he assured me it wasn't, and it wasn't even close to even that situation.
Yeah.
I figured those were probably some fun conversations.
I remember, I don't think I ever expected or had an expectation, but I remember people always like, you're going to go work for Kevin? You know he's going to chew your ass, right? I was like, yeah, we can win, you know? So I didn't care. I just wanted to win.
So here's what I tell everybody, and I found this out early. But you're a bottom line kind of guy, and it's all business to you. And you do your job and you do it right, and you don't get your ass chewed out.
I tell people that all the time. Like, that's the one thing I learned about you from day one is if you give 100%, you'll have that person's back even if they make a mistake. It's okay. I tell people I make more mistakes than anybody, and you've never yelled at me.
Yeah, well, I think that was the part that we talked about before he came to work. He's like, I think the perception was just what it was, right? Because it had come from just what you had heard and seen instead of being in the middle of it. And I think, it's just simple, right? Like, everybody just do what you're supposed to do, and we'll figure this out together. If you're not, then it just makes it more difficult. But I think I did get better at it, though. It would have been better from the beginning too if you didn't yell so much. But so I think that part, I always wanted to ask that question because I think it's interesting as to who was the hardest one to hire to convince that it wasn't going to be a disaster.
I don't know. I mean, everybody asked the question, I think.
It didn't take me much convincing. I was assured early on and of what our ultimate goals were and what we wanted to accomplish, and I knew what kind of racer Rodney was, and basically we were all racers, and we still are a core group of racers, and I think that's another thing that really helped the success is we had racers on the team, and that's what we were, is 100% racers, and not just race fans working on race cars.
Yeah. How much pressure did he put on everybody to win Phoenix that first year?
The intensity level was pretty high.
It's funny because we talked about...
The car was like a show car.
Yeah, and we talked about, he knew exactly, he had plotted out where all the strengths were from previous history, and he said, well, we're going to go to Phoenix, and we're going to do everything we can to win that race, but we're also going to run good at Pocono, and we're going to run good at Dover, and we're going to run good at any place that you have struggled. We're going to figure that out too. And I think that it was just interesting to me because ironically the first win was at Phoenix, and I think everybody knew that was like almost cherry picking at that particular point, just because of the way how fast the cars were. At that point, you just knew really all you had to do was keep the car together.
Yeah, not mess it up.
Not mess it up, not get it on our pit road, because in 2013, in December of 2013, we knew how fast it was going to be. Mm-hmm. From that point on, it was fast at the test. It was fast at all the races that we had been at up until Phoenix, and then at Phoenix, I think that was like the first race. Is like, okay, we should go here and win. In my mind.
Yeah, there was no doubt that we were going to win.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. We talk about building a team from the ground up, but also that season was a whole new vehicle package where you had the zero ride rule, and so not only were you building a new team, but now you had setup guys setting the cars up differently. You had car chiefs scaling the car differently. You had engineers looking at the setups and how they were going to manage their pipes and springs and all that stuff. So you had that on top of trying to build everything else too, which was even I think even more impressive, because it was everything. Like, you didn't have a notebook to go off of to jump in and say, hey, we know that this has always worked in the past. You had to build that from scratch too.
I think one of my favorite stories from Phoenix is when we went there after happy hour, and he sent me a text. And he said, hey, we got a decision to make. You remember this? After happy hour?
I don't remember.
He said, hey, we got a decision to make. Alan's over here asking for our files.
Oh, yeah.
What do you want to do? I said, well, just give him everything we have. And because that was one thing that my dad used to always tell me. He's like, just give them everything you have, because they won't believe you anyway. Well, that lasted for a long time. They never believed anything that we had. For a long time, but that was really the first decision that you had, because we had that Hendrick alliance at that particular time, and I guess it was Alan and Jeff at that particular time.
It may have been.
I think it was Alan and Jeff at that particular time, and that was just interesting how that piece of it evolved into them sharing a lot of the things that they did, and we shared with them. I always thought I think the Hendrick alliance never hurt anything. It became complicated the more we won, but I thought that was just one of my favorite moments, and I think you wound up basically
gave them everything.
You just plugged the key fob in,
and it ended up paying off in the fall, because we were going to Martinsville in the fall of 14, and we got there and we weren't very good, and we qualified like way bad. And Friday night, I asked them for everything that was in Jeff's car, and we switched everything over, and we were P1 in the second practice on Saturday morning, and was stupid fast. So, all that stuff ended up paying off in the long run, and that alliance was a good one for sure.
Well, even in 2014, I remember after practice, and Jimmy Johnson walked in the side door, eating an apple, walked in, hey guys, sat down, how's it going? What do you need? What's wrong? All right, it looks like you need to pull the side out a little bit more. Remember the sides were all flared out at that particular time? But it was just those, I don't know, you remember some of the most random things. I don't know if you guys remember it. I remember the crank falling off the Texas.
Oh, yeah.
But you remember some of the most random things.
That thing was ridiculously fast at happy hour.
It was crazy fast.
I remember at happy hour, we would tell you to run B laps.
Yeah.
So it didn't look.
About that time, we had to come up with C laps too.
So that's what we did in Texas. So I remember him he's like, I don't stop. Bring it to us. You're like, what's wrong? Nothing. We'll tell you when you get in here.
We were running along there, and we decided to change the sway bar, and we put a bigger sway bar in it, and it was like, it lit it on fire. We went back out, and I was like, oh my God, B laps, bring it back to us. It was absolutely crazy.
I had so much good fuel saving that year.
Yeah.
I think for me, Phoenix as a group gave us the confidence to know we could win.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of we believed it, but then once we did it, we knew it. But for me, I think the turning point towards the championship was Darlington. Mm-hmm. Because we overcome everything and still won Darlington. That was a bad weekend for us at Tech. race. We didn't execute everything perfectly, but we never gave up and won that. And then that to me was like when you said, well, after the second half we just raced. From there on, I felt like we just raced.
Yeah.
We didn't have money more.
Darlington was our
failure.
first pole of the year, and then we went on to sit on 8.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Right.
like starting on the front row and having the best pit box and all that stuff for the rest of the year, it was key to, number one, winning more races, but collecting more points and all that stuff that ended up mattering at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the playoffs, I mean, we basically had to win in every round in order to. Something still happened in every round. It seemed like as we went through there, and then going to Charlotte, knowing that you needed to win, and then pulling all that off was, that was a big moment. And then you go to Phoenix and do the exact same thing and pull it off, and then it was just, well, that's just what we did at that particular point. And you went to Homestead and it all. Yeah, you had to win, and you had to win. So I think it was a fun year. Homestead to me was almost like a relief that you were there, because of the fact that everything that had led up through the previous 9 weeks, because of the fact that there was such a roller coaster that went through, and the expectations at that point were to win, right? Like we had realized after Darlington that we probably had a realistic shot at winning the championship, and so that's why, to me, I put the most pressure on myself, because of the fact that was why I came here. And it's like, oh man, okay, I've never had this opportunity. Now I need to go figure out what we need to do to capitalize on doing my part, and because everything had come together from whatever everybody was doing, and so I mean for me, I was super worn out after we got done with Homestead, just mentally, because of everything that you had done. People didn't know if it was right or wrong, all the new people, but you may never have that opportunity again. I mean, we did, but ultimately you don't know at that particular day, like if you're ever going to get to that particular point. So for me, Homestead was a relief, because when we got in with Phoenix, it was like, all right, we overcame all that. This should be easy as we go to Homestead, because the pressure was actually just getting there, and we'd never been through that before with the new point system. And
I mean, we had as a group, at least shop guys anyway, I don't know about the road guys, but a little bit of the same feeling when we pushed that car onto the truck to go to Homestead. Okay, this is it, and long year, all that type of stuff, and it felt really good to put that thing on the truck and go win that thing.
I remember everything about Homestead, like every detail of it. And the thing that surprises me looking back on it is I never felt nervous one time. Like I'd never raced for a championship before, but like I think back on it, it's like, it was pure adrenaline. And I think that came from having to go to Charlotte and we won, having to go to Phoenix and we won. And then you show up at Homestead, it's like, well, we've already done this twice, we're gonna do it again. And like I remember all the stuff, the changes we made on the car and all that stuff, and going through tech and the calls during the race and stuff. Like never questioned one thing, never. I don't think I ever even asked anybody during the race like what I should do. Like should we do this or should we do that? It was like pure, adrenaline and gut, and it's just crazy to think about all that and how all that went. And people ask me that all the time. Were you nervous? No, not one bit.
It's because we're racers.
Yeah.
We've been in those situations in other aspects of racing. You've raced for championships and big prize money, and I've raced for championships and big prize money, and we both accomplished the same thing. And other people in this room have raced in other levels for championships, so it was just another race. I mean, it was an important race, but it's not like, oh my gosh, it wasn't a panic thing,
Yeah, I think for me it was just you had to answer the question over and over and over and over. You had to go do this, and you had to go do that, you had to go do this.
Yeah, it seemed like you got the raw end of it.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, man, I can't wait till this is all over. I don't have to answer any more questions. This is great.
For me, I didn't know how to lose a championship. So when we went to Homestead, we had never experienced losing one. that never even entered my mind.
Yeah.
Like, we knew at that point our confidence was so high after having to advance and doing it that we spent all that time preparing that race car. I remember how much work went into that, and it was awesome. It was like the most meticulously built race car we'd ever done.
Yeah.
It was just, we knew it was
Preparation was just out of sight.
I remember they
Hood didn't
pushing
open
it.
very good.
Pushing it in the truck. I remember thinking there's no way anybody has more race car than this. There's no possible way.
What about, how did engine tech go? Was that okay?
wasn't very No, it wasn't very good. So
Yeah.
we probably celebrated too hard prior to trying to tear that
I don't
down.
remember what the exact number of cases of beer was, but it was a lot.
80.
80 cases of beer?
We got
That's why
involved.
engine tech did.
We were
We went through 80 cases of beer before we got to tech.
Jeremy was tearing our engine down from that, and you know he's super excited like we all were.
Well, he's small.
He'd set the beer in the valley of the engine. He'd start working on the head bolts, and they're like, "Sir, you can't place your beer on the engine during teardown." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he was so polite and so deliberate, and he'd pick it up and he'd take a sip and set it back down. And I knew what he was doing, and I was like, "Hey, little buddy, like, I think we need to move that." He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he wasn't trying to be a smart aleck about it at all. And it did not go across. I said, let's go out there and take our picture together. We'll let some of the Hendrick guys tear this thing apart for you. What do you say? Oh, boy.
That's funny.
But we know those are the times that you think about it and make you smile 10 years later.
Yeah.
You know, that was what was so special about that weekend was those moments.
Yeah.
Had to pull the transmission out because Cardamone was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he couldn't get it out.
I remember
Yeah.
we got home, and you know it was just this super big ball of energy in the shop the following week post Homestead, and they were like, "What about this?" And you know the guys that weren't able to be there because they didn't travel, we were explaining to them, you know, and sharing that excitement with them. And one of the guys on our team's like, "Well, I took the springs out of the front." I said, "No, you didn't." Well, I got the bar out. No, you didn't. He's like, "Shoot, man, I guess I had a lot of fun then, didn't I?"
Yeah.
And so, you know, sometimes we reminded some of the road guys what they did too.
Yeah.
The hood story.
The hood story, yeah.
The hood story was a good one.
I forgot. That was pretty much my fault. I forgot
Yeah.
we had prepared the hood to stay sealed for the whole race. And I went to open that sucker and it wasn't going to open. I had to get some further tools to assist in that job. But,
Yeah.
you know, that was what was so fun and special about that year is those preparations to that race car to make it have every bit it could. That was the most fun part of that whole year is how hard we raced and how hard as a group collectively we would sit like this and say, okay, what else can we do? What else have we thought of, or what can we make? What part can we make? How can we make this car better, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that every person was fully invested in that. We prioritized winning. That was it. It wasn't hours, cost, budget. We never sat around and was like, well, that part's gonna be pretty expensive to make. We didn't care.
No.
We made it because it made us better and we
Yeah.
wanted to win.
Yeah.
And that's what made that group so special.
Mm-hmm.
Made this group so special.
Yeah.
Yeah, during that Homestead race, Newman was still in the hunt, and he was complaining about, I was watching on TV, and he was complaining about his car being a little tight. And then they came in on a pit stop, and I saw that the crew members out over the wall start flaring out that right rear quarter panel. And as soon as they did that, I knew they were toast after that. I mean, it was going to help downforce, but they're already tight, and it was just going to tighten the car up more. So it just
Remember, they just kind of let all that go. At that point, they were like, we can't stop it. There's no rules.
It was so much fun, but it was so crazy at the same time.
It was like I told the guys during that season, this was like a Wild Wild West show, you know?
Oh, it's so bad.
It was
Yeah.
fun though.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah. It was weird. Like, it was almost like that's what you somewhat expected.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't really, for me, it really wasn't like this great feeling. It was like, all right, well, we did what we
And
were
it's the
supposed
same.
to do.
It's the same way in a race. Let's say you show up at a race and you're the fastest in practice, and you sit on the pole and you lead, 500 of 600 miles, and you go to victory lane. You stand there in victory lane like, yeah, we did that. But the ones when you show up and you're 20th in practice, you qualified 20th, and you run 15th all day, and you work and you work and you work, and somehow you take the lead on the last lap and go to victory lane. It's like the best victory lane ever. And that's kind of how it was. It's like we just felt like we were expected to win. And like when you got to victory lane, like, yeah, we were all happy and crying and this and that. But it was, I don't know, it was just a weird feeling like, was this going to sink in tomorrow? But it was really just, we knew going into it, that's what we were going to do. And then
I was like, who the hell are all these people? I don't know how you guys dealt with the pit box, but I got out of the car and I'm like, man, these aren't the people that I race with every week. Where did all these people come from? That was the weird part for me.
I think
like all the people that wanted to celebrate, and then you couldn't even get, like, I didn't even make it to you guys until, I mean, it was well after we had won and celebrated, and until the trophy presentation. And I was like, I don't know, that part to me was weird. Mm-hmm. And I think my biggest concern in the whole thing was, what are we going to do for 2015? And you probably remember this conversation. That was one of the first conversations that we had is, okay, how do we not fall on our face now? Because now you set these expectations to go out and win the championship. And that was literally my biggest concern when we got done. It was like, okay, we did what we needed to do, but we can't go lay an egg the next year.
I think we went on to have, like 9 top 2s in a row after that or something like that. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. Crazy.
I mean, I've told the guys throughout the season, time or two, as we were, having quite a bit of success, I told the guys and kind of reminded them, I said, it's one thing getting to the top, but it's really hard to stay at the top. Mm-hmm. And, we'd bring that up from time to time and trying to do the best we could not to, get relaxed,
Yeah, because it just becomes, it's just a way that you race. And I think Jimmy and Chad did that really well. Mm-hmm. We had that conversation of how do we race like we did in the playoffs? And that was really our goal for 2015 is how do we race like that every week? Because we kind of got, in the middle of 2014, you felt like, the middle of the year was kind of like, the middle of the year was kind of weird as far as 14 went with the racetracks and just the way that some of those things went. And then all of a sudden we got in the playoffs and we were just pulling the trigger week after week after week. And then as we got into 2015, it was like pull the trigger. I mean, it was just, that's just what you had. And that's just what we went in with that expectation, because the first half of 14 was just literally building the cars and building the team.
I remember we were so fast all year.
Oh, I know exactly what I wanted to say.
Well, it's not too long.
My favorite story, I have a lot of favorite stories, but one of my favorite stories from that particular night, was Jimmy John. Do you remember? Jimmy John. So Jimmy John was sitting on the pit box, if I remember correctly, and there was like 2,000 people in the pit area. Right?
At least.
Yeah. I mean, when we won the championship, those camera shots are the coolest camera shots ever, because the camera starts vibrating and everybody's jumping and screaming. But Jimmy John sat on the pit box and he decided to pit with 11 laps to go? 12 laps to go, something like that?
Yeah, 12 or 14.
He got off the pit box. He said, well, they're not going to win. So he had Josh Katz take him in the golf cart, and Josh is like, are you sure that you want to leave? Are you sure you want to leave? And he said, well, he went to the tunnel, drove all the way to the tunnel with Jimmy on the golf cart to go to the helipad. And he got to the tunnel, and he's like, I'm just not going to take you out this gate because I just don't think it's over yet. And we took the lead, and that caution came out, and Jimmy had to drive back to the pit box. I think he got back up on the pit box before it was all said and over with. But he left and thought the race was over, and then came back after we took the lead. So that was fun.